Greetings and welcome back. In this section, we're going to take a look at expanding on what we've learned in our previous lectures on creating Odoo applications. And so this time we're going to take and create our own model from scratch. And to review, in our previous sections, we've created a module here, or an application, that extends our product template with 3 fields: calories, serving size, and last updated. And then in our view, we've also extended our tree and our form view to have these fields in them. And so here we can see our tree view with serving size, calories, and last updated. And here we can see our form view with calories, serving size, and last updated. In addition, remember that we created an action that allows us to only look at the diet items by themselves by using this domain name. So this restricts the list of records to just showing the ones that have diet items in them. And then we created a menu to show those diet items. So our application right now looks like this. If we click on diet items, we see just the diet items, and we can see our calories. And under products, if we look at our products this way, we can also go in here and edit this. And by picking a different category here, picking the diet items category, this item will now be added to our diet items list. So that's the overview of the application as it stands now. And what we're going to do is we're going to create our own model that's going to handle menus. And a menu will be basically anything that you have at the time of day to eat. So if it could be a menu for your breakfast, or it could be a menu for lunch or dinner, but it could also be a snack that you have that you might create a menu for a couple of things you've eaten. And the goal is to total up, first calories will total up here in this section, and then later, as we expand our application, we could also look at other nutrients and other items that when you look and see, for example, how much sodium there is for the day and carbohydrates for the day and so forth, that these can be totaled and calculated. And so that's where we're going with this application. And in this video, we're going to expand the model. So what is our model going to look like? Well, we know we want to call it we could call it a menu, but that might get it confused with other menus. So let's call it a meal. So we're going to call each time we have and sit down and eat something, we're going to call that a meal. And then those meals will contain meal items, because you might eat, for example, a piece of chicken and have some green beans and have some mashed potatoes. You might then have a soda as well, and you would have all those items, those diet items, listed under your meal. So let's create a meal model. We'll start by pulling up Eclipse and opening up our dietfacts.py. And so right now this is a very short file. There's no reason to break out our menu, or I should say meal, in another file. We'll just keep it in here. So let's begin by typing class dietfacts. So we keep our syntax the same. And we can choose here, how do we want to reference our meals? Well, meals are really not, I would think, tied as much to the products or the diet items as they may be tied to the users. So let's go ahead and say res users, and then we'll say meal. So this is just the naming convention that we're giving to name the meal that we're going to add, and allow users to keep their own meals and then decide what they eat on them. So I'm going to go here and again just copy from what we have above, models.model. That is just the syntax. Okay? So now, once again, we need a name. And this time, we can give this our own name. And so I'm going to pick res.users.meal. Now, I might not use users, I might use user. Let's look at our syntax real quick by going to settings and going to the database structure and looking at models. And I know res.user is a model within Odoo. So this is why I've picked res.users to be where I'm going to say basically that these are the meals for the users. And so anybody who's a user within Odoo, and that could be a portal user, somebody that just is signed in through the website, or I could restrict that if I chose. But the idea is basically we want to tie to res.users. And so this model, for example, is going to be represented, and we want to put that in the name of our model so that it makes sense when somebody reads this and they see res users meal and res users meal here, that they know that this is associated with this model. And so now we also need to have a way to name this meal. So it could be lunch, it could be dinner, it could be breakfast, it could be anything. So we're just going to let them name the meal whatever they want, and we'll use the same syntax as we would adding other fields like we did up here, but this time it's going to be a character field, and we'll call this meal name. So this will be the name of our meal. And then there's also going to be like the date and the time of the meal, because we're going to want to total these meals up by day and use the features inside of Odoo that are built into our data tools and our tree views so that we can total up these meals. So let's go ahead and call this the menu date. Just like you would have order date in a sales order, we're going to call this the menu date. And we can again use the same syntax we used up here, but this time let's go ahead and have a date time, because we might want to do something with that. And you can see here that that's one of our options is date time. And let's go ahead and call that the menu date. We'll still call it the menu date, but we know that we might want to collect time, because this might be something for times a day that we want to see what we're eating. And then we're going to now have a field that is going to be a new type of field that we're learning about as part of this lecture, and that's a one-to-many field. And this is going to basically be the items that are on our menu. So a menu is going to have essentially a header like a sales order with a name, a menu date, and I can also say a user ID as well. But we're also going to have item IDs. And item IDs will be a list of all the items that we want in our menu. So I'm going to type item ID underscore IDs. And we are now going to link this as a one-to-many to the menu items that we're going to have available for our menu. So let's go ahead, and at this point I'm going to leave this like it is, because one of the principles of these designs is we don't want to necessarily complicate it with a particular model we don't have yet. We don't have our menu items yet. Our meal items. We only have, and I want this to be meal too. I gotta stop saying menu. We want to say meal, because it'll make it easier for us to keep from getting confused when we're talking about menus within Odoo. So our meal date and our meal name and our user's meal, we are going to have items on those. So we're going to have to create another class to hold those. We're going to have a meal items model, but we don't have that yet. So let's leave that out. Instead, we're going to hook up our user ID to our res users table. Remember the model that we saw a little bit ago. So let's go ahead and write the syntax out for it, and then I'll explain it to you. We're going to use what's called a many-to-one, and we're going to tie it to res.users, just like that. And we can then have a name for this. We can say meal user. We'll just keep it like that for now to give it a label. And what this is going to tell Odoo is that res users is what's going to be tied to this user ID. And this underscore ID is important because that tells Odoo that we want to tie through the model to the res user who has this meal. So we're going to go ahead and save this just like it is. And we could have a notes field too. So let's add one more field. So we could have meal notes here. And that's a text field. It'll just have whatever notes we want on our meal. And what we want to do is we want to be able to enter the name of our meal, give our meal a date and a time, and then we want to set who it is, which user it is within the system that this meal belongs to. And how are we going to do that in the code? This is the key in the code, is we're saying many-to-one, meaning that there's many users out there, but only one of them can be assigned the user ID for this meal. So this is going to be who ate the meal, and we're tying it to the res.users table that we looked at earlier. So we're going to go ahead and save this, and we can go ahead and pull up our terminal. I'm running it right now in a terminal, and you can choose now whether you want to run it here in the terminal or whether you want to run it from within Eclipse. I'm choosing to do it within the terminal because I think it's a little faster. But I'm going to hit Control-C to stop the application from running, and then we hit the up arrow to bring back up our connection string, which you should already have. And if you don't have it, you'll need to look at the previous videos, or you can copy it here. But basically this is the connection string to Odoo, or this is the statements and switches that are required to update our module and our application. So let's go ahead and run that and make sure that we can properly update our application. And sure enough, everything ran, so we know we don't have any errors within this. And that, remember, everything has to be indented properly, 4 spaces in, and make sure there's no errors here. Now we can go in and verify in our models that we have that model that we just created. So I type res.users and hit enter, and now we can see our res.users meal. And when I click on it, I can see that it's pulled in a lot of other things that come with the class, just making a class in Odoo. As you can see, making our own model brought along a lot of fields that we don't have to add manually. You can see the ID that will always be the unique ID, the primary key for every record in this model, our create date, create user ID. We get a display name as it pulled over for us automatically. But you'll also see the things we've added, our notes, our meal date, and our user ID that we created for our meal user. So now we know we have our model. We need to create a way to see this model and have it show up for us and list it. For now, we'll just list it here under our menu that we have for diet items. So that's what we'll do in our next lecture. So just to recap, we added a brand new model to Odoo's application. We verified it by going in through the debug mode, looking at it. Now we'll see how we can actually get to that new model and edit the data within it.